Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LiUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferenc.
Unemployment still under 4%. The good news, wages are going up. Meanwhile, steelworkers fighting right to work in New Hampshire. And today on the show, the latest from the Valley Labor Report and the general president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists. Welcome to the Monday, January 8th edition of America's Workforce, where we are available on at least 5 platforms. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Adam Keller is going to be our first guest on the show today. Adam serves as co-host and co-producer of the Valley Labor Report. He is also the political coordinator for his union, which would be IATSE Local 900, based in Huntsville, Alabama. And I'll tell you, IATSE has been on a roll. We're going to talk about new organizing wins in the video special effects field, video game industries. There was a recent win with the Lions Theater in Atlanta, Georgia, where over 30 crew members won voluntary recognition of the union. And here's the best part, they got a first contract. We're going to talk about getting that first contract. You know that's very difficult, but it helps to have a powerful union like, in this case, IATSE, behind you. Alabama Arise. We'll talk about what's going on there. As I mentioned, Adam serves as an organizer, and this is a statewide nonprofit coalition fighting for people marginalized by poverty. We know there's a lot of people in that category. We'll also take a look at the legislature. They're going to meet on February 6th. Some contentious issues like tax cuts, voting rights, school choice, mega prisons coming up. And speaking of prisons, there's a heck of a story that I came across recently about what's going on in Alabama prisons. The retail workers, the AFL-CIO, and the Union of Southern Service Workers, which has the backing of SEIU, along with civic and civil rights organizations, went to federal court, this happened about a month ago, to stop the exploitation of prisoners. A lot of companies, over 4,000 companies, are taking advantage, and this is just in the state of Alabama, they're taking advantage of forced prison labor. Now, you think about what's been going on in this country for decades, where companies have relocated in places where there is cheap labor. Used to be Mexico, then they went to China, then they went to Vietnam. Why bother when you can use prison labor? And that's what's going on. And now there's a lawsuit. And Adam is going to talk about that as well. David Spiro will be joining us later in the show. David serves as national president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists. Their website is passnational.org, and they're in the middle of some bargaining, 2 collective bargaining agreements at the FAA, and that's been going on for quite some time. There's also a great deal of attention, media attention, on air traffic controllers and runway incursions. Why is this going on? Well, the problem is lack of staffing. Controllers are not, we're talking air traffic controllers, are not the only FAA workforce that is underfunded, understaffed, and overworked. The members of PASS, they are in the same predicament. Now, these are the people working behind the scenes. We're also going to talk about mental health. The National Transportation Safety Board recently held a summit on navigating mental health in aviation. And one member of PASS, a pilot, was on a panel. And President Spiro was on the afternoon roundtable, and he's going to talk about that. It's really interesting, too, because if pilots speak out, and David's going to talk about this, if they speak out about any possibility of a mental health issue, they're gone. They're gone. So it's very, very touchy. And David is going to talk about that. Again, passnational.org. You can see some posts on that. And now, look into the world of labor. The segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. The U.S. ended 2023 with an unemployment rate of 3.7%. Economists cheered the report as the jobless rate was in a narrow range between 3.5% and 3.7% for the entire year. Now, the number of jobless actually increased by 6,000 in December to end the year at just over 6.2 million. Private sector claimed to create 164,000 new jobs. Governments adding 52,000 jobs in December. Leisure and hospitality reported adding 40,000 jobs. Some 55% of December's increase, by the way, came in the lowest paying jobs in that sector, and that was in bars and restaurants. Wage growth, now here's a bright spot. Wage growth in 2023 was 4.1%, which outpaced inflation. One big gain occurred at hospitals, which added 15,000 jobs, and airlines and mass transit each added 3,700 jobs in December. Factories, well, they added 6,000 jobs, and that prompted a statement from Scott Paul, one of our partners here on America's Workforce, on behalf of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Scott said, "If you build it, they will come, but it takes time and a whole lot of good policy." The weak factory jobs in December show that while there is a genuine factory construction boom underway, we shouldn't take factory job creation for granted. As a whole, 2023 was a disappointing year for manufacturing employment, with only 12,000 new jobs added. Now, some of this labor market weakness is attributable to consumers rebalancing goods and services spending, and some of it is attributable to the Federal Reserve's interest rates hikes and an overly strong dollar. But we are leaving manufacturing jobs on the table because import penetration is still way too high. Scott Paul on behalf of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. You can find more at americanmanufacturing.org. The steelworkers are gearing up to fight against right to work in the state of New Hampshire, and this comes just days before the first in-the-nation Republican primary there. The union activated its rapid response team there to descend upon the state capital, Concord, for a January 10th public hearing. That would be this Wednesday on the measure. Now, mind you, right to work has failed in prior right-wing tries in New Hampshire, and that legislature is narrowly Republican. The USW said anti-worker lawmakers and their corporate cronies in New Hampshire are wasting no time in picking their first fight by bringing up right to work, which is often referred to as right to work for less. So-called right to work laws are nothing more than an attempt by outside corporate special interest groups to abolish unions altogether. They couldn't care less about the freedom of New Hampshire's workers. The union went on to say such laws are deliberately designed to make it harder for unions to help workers negotiate for better pay as well as working conditions. So we'll definitely keep our eye on that one. All right, quick break. When we come back, Adam Keller on behalf of the Valley Labor Report.
This is America's Workforce.
It takes LiUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LiUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LiUNA at LiUNA.org. That's LiUNA.org.
The Ironworkers Great Lakes District Council, consisting of 8 ironworker local unions in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. We build the skylines and bridges along the Great Lakes. With more work than ever before, the Great Lakes District Council is actively searching out the next great ironworker, whether it's building the next Intel plant or constructing a bridge to safely connect our great cities along the lake. So join the Ironworkers Great Lakes District Council today Find out how and learn more about the council by visiting iwdistrictcouncil.com. This portion of the show brought to you by the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. For more information, please visit bacweb.org.
Union members need to be heard. Reliable and convenient union voting has never been more important than it is now. Make voting easy for your membership by working with survey and ballot systems. SBS offers encrypted and monitored solutions that ensure your elections are accurate and accessible for every member through mail-in, online, and in-person voting. Visit surveyandballotsystems.com and take the next step in getting secure and auditable elections.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at LiUNA.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferenc.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast. By the way, this next segment brought to you in part by the Ohio Federation of Teachers. You can find more at oh.aft.org. Let's go to the state of Alabama right now and welcome to the show. First time in the new year. Had him on many times last year. That would be Adam Keller, who is the co-host and co-producer of the Valley Labor Report. TVLR.FM is their website. And as we all know, last year was a great year for unions. A lot of strikes, wages going up, a lot of organizing, and Adam was in the middle of it all in the state of Alabama. Adam Keller, welcome back to the show. Happy New Year to you, brother. Talk to me about getting some big wins for your union, which would be IATSE Local 900. Go ahead.
Hey, brother. It's so great to be on America's Workforce again, and happy 2024. Yeah, I'm real proud to be a member of IATSE, and our Local 900 had a pretty good year in Huntsville doing the behind-the-scenes entertainment work at the new Orion Amphitheater. It just opened in 2022 in Huntsville. It's had some really big acts come through, like Snoop Dogg, Willie Nelson, rock shows, country, hip-hop. That's been great to get new work for our members locally, and a credit to, our business agent and our leadership for securing those contracts. As political coordinator, I really have a goal this year in 2024 of getting 100% of our rank and file members registered to vote, and try to get as many of those as possible to the polls to vote and to make legislative contacts. And I know I'll be talking a little bit about Alabama politics here in a minute. I want to get our members engaged in that. And, there's a lot of good momentum happening in IATSE. It seems like I was checking the labor board filings over the last few weeks for the Valley Labor Report, and I noticed more filings from IATSE, including here in the South. There's 10 remote animation workers at Disney, including folks in Tennessee, Texas, Virginia. They just filed for an election with the Animation Guild, which is IATSE Local 839. There were 9 workers in Greenville, South Carolina, just filed for an election with IATSE. And there was an election where in Chesterfield, Virginia, the Conversion Geeks, 11 workers there voted unanimously in favor of the Animation Guild, which is part of IATSE Local 839. So lots of new filings and elections happening with IATSE. They just put out a release a couple weeks ago about a big win in Atlanta. The workers at Atlanta's Alliance Theater, they won voluntary recognition of their contract, and they won their first union contract. And that's really exciting. We all know in the labor movement, it's one thing to win a union election, but it's another thing to get a first contract. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, so many campaigns, run into that resistance and never actually even secure a first contract, or it takes many years to do so. So shout out to the, over 30 crew members at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta for getting that. That includes wardrobe workers, fly rail operators, audio engineers, spotlight operators, hair and makeup workers. So, real diverse crew across some of the professions that make up IATSE. And they're already winning wage increases. They're already winning overtime protections and meal break protections and holidays. And so that's great to see. And, we need to see more of it. IATSE's had some big wins in the VFX department, the video special effects, winning at Marvel and Disney. So hopefully we'll see the momentum continue in 2024, continue to grow in those pockets of the entertainment industry that are not currently organized, and continue to see the growth in industries like the video game worker industry. Proud to be a member of IATSE, looking forward to working locally to try to build our political power, and hoping to continue to report back to my members on all these big wins across the country.
To your point, Adam, these are very significant wins, and when you add them all up, we're talking a lot of members here. But I have to stop you a little bit. You said something, I think it was in Virginia, about conversion geeks. I need to know a little bit more about conversion geeks. Can you explain that one?
I honestly don't know a whole lot more about what they do. I just, judge from the National Labor Board filing, and saw, there's 11 workers there. They voted unanimously in favor of unionization with the Animation Guild. So I'm going to assume they do some sort of animation adjacent work. But that's really interesting. And I'll tell you, that's one fascinating thing that we run across when we do our Last Week in Southern Labor report, and we go through all the labor board filings every week across the South. We run across really interesting businesses, really interesting types of workers, things that I had never heard of, companies you have never heard of, companies with strange names. You run across people with jobs that you've never heard of. And the really cool thing is you see these people on the move and who are organizing and trying to build power on the job, regardless of what kind of job that is.
Adam, if you don't mind, I want to talk a little bit more about getting that first contract. You mentioned the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. And I keep thinking back to the Starbucks workers in Staten Island, New York, and it was independent, Amazon labor union. They still don't have a first contract. And what bothers me about this, these are independent unions, and they don't have the push from the big national unions. Like in this case, it was IATSE. Can you reflect on what they brought to the table to get that first contract? It's important that you have all the resources, all the technological advances to get in there and say, hey, we're going to hammer down a first contract. Can you spell that out for us?
Yeah, I think in this case, you had an advantage in that, these are professions that are already organized by IATSE, right? The spotlight operators, the fly rail operators, audio engineers, people doing those jobs in similar environments in the city of Atlanta are already organized by multiple IATSE locals, actually, 798, 859, and 927, right? There's so many different types of folks doing the work that there's multiple locals in the Atlanta area, right? Which means they have multiple contracts already. They have relationships with multiple venues already. And so I think that makes it a little maybe less scary for the venue itself, for the employer to see, okay, well, this is working everywhere else, seems to be successful, and, we can implement that here as well. And I think, that was an advantage we even saw here in Huntsville, where we had a record of success at the long-standing venue in town, the Von Braun Center. So when they opened the new Orion Amphitheater, it was sort of natural that, of course, our local professionals who already have a record of success here and a record of good faith negotiations, let's do business with them. Let's make that happen. And so, I think there was some advantages there in that situation. What you're speaking to, though, there is this broader concern that, and it's been growing over recent years. This is a trend that has gotten worse over recent years. So we've seen, union membership overall decline, but getting the first contract, that has declined as well. And And you're exactly right that a lot of the new organizing is coming from independent efforts, and there's pros and cons either way on that, I believe. But you mentioned one of the cons, which is obviously there's less resources and less institutional backup to put pressure on the employer to get that first contract. But unfortunately, even with some legacy unions, we're seeing some of the same struggles, which speaks to we have a broken labor law regime in this country, which really, incentivizes employers to do the wrong thing because they don't face the penalties for doing the wrong thing. Right? It can be a simple cost of business that they write off, no big deal, just a little, chump change for their budget. And so I think there are some bigger issues there, and I do think that one thing that we can do as members, which is really important, like what can you do as a member, which is the organizing part, is so huge to getting your first contract. You can't just win your election and think, okay, well, we did it, and I think there's like a natural human response to feel that way. Like it's a big relief, it's a big win, and your natural reaction is to kind of take a breath and take a step back. But really that's when the hard work begins. And that's when the internal organizing is going to be so important to keep your momentum up and to keep the pressure on the employer to do the right thing and negotiate a contract in a reasonable manner.
Adam Keller joining us on our live line today. He's co-host and co-producer of the Valley Labor Report, also political coordinator for IATSE Local 900, and he's an organizer for Alabama Arise. We'll talk about Alabama Arise and also a legislative preview for Alabama. Later in the show, we're going to check in with David Spiro on behalf of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialist. Back in a few minutes.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferenc.
It takes LiUNA to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LiUNA members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LiUNA at LiUNA.org. That's LiUNA.org.
Are you an experienced mechanical insulator looking to take your career to the next level? Insulators Local 50 in Central Ohio has steady work for a number of years. Insulators Local 50 offers a total wage and benefits package that can't be beat. It's not just the competitive wages. Local 50 also provides medical, vision, and dental insurance with no paycheck deductions for you and your family. Don't miss out on the chance to secure your future. Join us at Insulators Local 50. Earn great pay and the best benefits. Visit insulators50.com/AWF50 to fill out the online form, and a Local 50 representative will call to begin the process.
Hey, this is Sean McGarvey, and I'm president of North America's Building Trades Unions, and I'm a proud listener of America's Workforce. I love this podcast.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Auto Workers. Find more at uaw.org.
This segment of America's Workforce is brought to you by Survey and Ballot Systems. SBS has been providing unions with secure and flexible election options for over 30 years. Visit surveyandballotsystems.com to learn more.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferenc with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. We always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. By the way, this next segment brought to you in part by the United Labor Agency, ulagency.org is a website. Let's go back to Huntsville, Alabama, and rejoin Mr. Adam Keller on behalf of the Valley Labor Report. He serves as co-host and co-producer. Do check out their website, tvlr.fm, tvlr.fm. Been around, 4 years now, and they're going strong. The mouth of the South. That's what I call them. Adam, I want to talk about Alabama Arise. This is a great organization. It's a statewide, it's a nonprofit, and it's targeting so many people, and there are so many in this category that are suffering from poverty. Your role in that, and what do you see for Alabama Arise this year?
Yeah, I am really excited. I've been working as a community organizer for the past few months with Alabama Rise. I was a proud member of the organization for years. The whole time I've been an activist in Alabama, I've been a member of Alabama Rise, which is something that's really cool about the organization. It's, in some ways similar to our unions in that you join as a member, you pay dues. You pay a little bit of dues every year. As a dues-paying member, you then vote on the legislative priorities for the year, right? So the agenda that Alabama Rise has each year when we go to the legislators and to the state government is selected by our members. And our members are over 1,000 folks from the state, across the state, just individuals, as well as about 150 groups. Most of those groups are churches and faith-based congregations, but some grassroots groups as well, and some labor unions, some labor councils are also a part of Arise. And so there's a real opportunity to build coalition there around poverty and the impact of poverty on Alabamians, particularly a statewide public policy lens. What are the leaders in our capital in Montgomery doing or not doing that's impacting poor folks and working class folks across the state? So it's a real pleasure to be able to work in this coalition and to be able to work together with folks. I've got some exciting events coming up. I'm doing an advocacy training later this month in Huntsville where we're open to members of the public, to Arise members, to labor allies, anyone who's interested in learning how to be a more effective advocate, especially when it comes to your state government, understanding how the legislature works, how they operate, what a bill looks like and how it goes through the system, what points of leverage we have as citizens to actually pressure those legislators and when should we pressure them, how should we do that. And so I'm really excited about that. We're going to have other opportunities for members to get engaged with legislative previews, and issue previews to learn more about what we're advocating for, as well as what do we expect, what's going to happen. The legislative session starts on February 6th, so we have a lot of work to do to prepare our folks. And I'm really just excited about growing the coalition with labor. IATSE 900, my union, joined our Cover Alabama coalition to expand Medicaid, which was really a big win, and getting the North Alabama Labor Council to join Alabama Arise was huge as well this past fall, because the more we're working together, the stronger we are, right? We're all out here trying to advocate for working people here in the state. So the more we can collaborate, the more we can join our forces, the stronger we'll be. I'm reading a book right now called The Southern Key by Michael Goldfield, all about organizing in the South during the 30s and the 40s. The potentials and the missed opportunities there with labor organizing, interracial organizing in particular. And he talks about associative power. And the unions that had a lot of success had associative power. They had power not just in the workplace, but in the community through their alliances with churches, civil rights groups, other community groups, you name it. Anywhere that people power is manifesting, the more labor can engage with that and be in coalition, the stronger we'll be. And we need that. We need massive working class people power to push back, especially in a state like Alabama where we have been dominated for so much of our history by these wealthy, powerful interests who don't give a damn about us and who are content with the poverty and the lack of first world conditions here in the state. So, it's exciting. It's always scary when the legislature's going into session, but yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to work with folks who are justice-minded and who do believe that a better Alabama is possible.
Adam, if you don't mind, I want to pick up on what you say about the wealthy few that are pretty much in control. And I came across a story here that involves several unions, the retail workers, which is tied in with the food and commercial workers, the AFL-CIO, and the Union of Southern Service Workers. And they have filed a lawsuit in federal court to stop the exploitation of prison labor. And apparently, and I know a lot of prisons have been privatized over the years, and apparently some businesses are using, not just some, but a number of them, are using prison labor. Can you explain what is? I would imagine this has been going on for quite some time in the state of Alabama. Is that right?
Yes, sir. It has been going on for some time. It's my understanding. It's a mega lawsuit that drops last month in December, and I was really proud. First, I want to say I was proud that labor unions and civil rights groups and others were all working together on this litigation. That speaks to what I was saying. The more we can be in coalition, the stronger we can be. And I was really proud to see those diverse interests coming together, to see labor stepping up and coming together with folks to fight for the rights of these incarcerated brothers and sisters of ours, whether we like it or not. These are our neighbors, and far too many of them in the state of Alabama are incarcerated. Alabama has one of the highest incarceration rates in the country, which means we have one of the highest incarceration rates on planet Earth. And it's no surprise that it's a disproportionately black population that are in these prisons. And as you spoke to, the lawsuit is over what is being alleged to be modern-day convict leasing. And, we thought that convict leasing ended in Alabama, in the 1920s, when the United Mine Workers of America were very instrumental in putting an end to that practice, or so we thought. But what we've discovered in this lawsuit is that the Alabama Department of Corrections and various agencies and entities within them and adjacent to them are working with private companies and even in some cases local governments to lease out incarcerated workers and to coerce them. Because we have, and something the lawsuit underscored is that Alabama's prisons are unconstitutional every single day because of the sheer amount of violence and extreme policy violations that take place throughout our system, right? So right now, as I'm speaking, they are violating the Constitution. So if you are incarcerated, that's your alternative, right? You can be a convict leased employee who is not receiving all your wages, right? As you mentioned, the fines and fees. The Alabama Department of Corrections and these others are taking huge cuts from the wages. The wages themselves are not the same as what, free civilians are being paid in the first place. So there's just mega exploitation happening there. And the incarcerated workers reported threats and coercion if they refuse to go to work. And that's aside from the fact that if they do refuse to go to work, right, where are they staying? Where they're staying in these prisons that are extremely violent and dangerous and unconstitutional. So it's a devil's choice. So it's a really extreme form of exploitation, and it's something that our labor movement has always been vocal about because it, beyond the sheer cruelty of it to the people involved, it of course also affects all working people because, that is a way to, again, skew the playing field. If you can bring in incarcerated workers into a facility, right, those are people that are more easily exploited, that can be paid less, that are going to be a lot less likely to organize a union and face much more severe consequences if they even try to organize. And that's important to note that these were private businesses, in some cases fast food restaurants like KFC and Wendy's, right, which have seen worker organizing across the South and across the country. But there was also local governments like the city of Montgomery, And then there was a beverage distributor. There was Hyundai supply chain. That is worth noting, right? So Hyundai, which has already been busted for using child labor in their supply chain, has also been using these convict leased labor in their supply chain. So it's a pretty far-reaching problem. I wanted to highlight a quote here from Janet Harold. She's the legal director of Justice Catalyst Law. And she said, quote, "The forced labor scheme that currently exists in the Alabama prison system is the modern reincarnation of the notorious convict leasing system that replaced slavery after the Civil War." And that's huge to me.
Yeah.
To know that is happening in the year 2024, it's unacceptable. And the last thing I'll say about it is that there has been very little that I can tell in terms of response from Alabama's leaders, right? Governor Kay Ivey, Attorney General Steve Marshall, they are named in this lawsuit. There are legislators who, cover every bit of this state, and I have seen almost nothing. I haven't seen anything coming out from any of these politicians to speak on this and to share what they think about it, right? So that's going to be interesting, and that's something I'll be looking for this legislative session is, what kind of response are we going to get from our government? Is this something that they can condemn, or is this something they continue to condone?
My guess they won't say anything until they show up in court. And that lawsuit was filed last month. That's huge. And there's 4,100 companies. Tufts University looked into this. 4,100 companies in Alabama taking advantage of prison labor. Amazing. Adam, great job as usual. Adam Keller, co-host, co-producer of the Valley Labor Report. Do check him out. tvlr.fm. You can also check them out on Facebook, the Valley Labor Report. Let's rejoin in about 4 to 6 weeks, and we can talk about the legislative session. You said it starts on February 6th. Okay, my brother?
That sounds great. Sending my love and solidarity from Alabama, y'all.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. David Spiro is the national president of Professional Aviation Safety Specialists, and he's coming up next.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LiUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LiUNA. Find out what it takes for LiUNA to keep America running at LiUNA.org. That's LiUNA.org.
Hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland at 216-881-1802. Call Music Talent of Cleveland as your dependable source for professional musicians in Northeast Ohio. Union musicians add harmony to weddings, elegance to parties, and uplifting music for all events. Music Talent of Cleveland contracts solo and ensemble musicians as well as bands and orchestras for single engagements. So hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland today. 216-881-1802.
This is Brent Booker, General President of the Laborers International Union of North America, and we're a proud sponsor of America's Workforce, where workers feel the power every single day.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
A great union requires a reliable election system. Survey and Ballot Systems is a trusted election partner with more than 30 years of expertise in managing union elections. By partnering with SBS, your union can ensure it gets an auditable process and a high level of customer service. SBS is here to help you conduct your union vote securely, transparently, and with trust building always in mind. Visit surveyandballotsystems.com to learn more.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferenc.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be a WF Union podcast. Let's go to Washington right now. Welcome back to the show, David Spiro. We've been in communication with him over the last year. He is now 2 years president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists Union, passnational.org. Altogether, David has spent 30 years with the union, and he's here to talk about, well, they're having a little difficult time with the FAA negotiating some collective bargaining agreements. David, welcome back to the show. Why don't we start right there? How are we doing with these negotiations right now?
Hi, Flash. Thanks for having me back. So we are moving forward. We've got 2 contracts that we're working on. One for our aviation safety bargaining unit. They comprise the aviation safety inspectors and our aviation safety technicians. They oversee the regulations for FAA when it comes to air carrier, general aviation, manufacturing, everything that has to do with the aviation industry, pilots, checking them out, making sure everything's airworthy, and also the avionics on the aircraft, all that sort of stuff. We are about 2 years into that negotiation now. It is getting pretty close. There's a handful of items that we're still kind of stuck on, but I think I'm hopeful that we can actually have something done in a relatively short period of time. I think it's critical that happen. So that one's moving forward. I got to thank back in the summer the former acting administrator and current Deputy Secretary of Transportation, Polly Trottenberg, for helping step on the gas and getting a lot of it done. And I spoke with FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker last week and spoke with him about how important it is to get these negotiations finished and to close out some of the work that everybody's done. So I think we're going to get there on that one. That said, the other contract that we're working on is for the air traffic organization, and that's a lot of folks who support the air traffic organization on the technical operations side and a few other bargaining units. Effectively, though, it's about 7,000 employees that we represent in that group. That's going slower, and there a lot of what we're going to do is built upon what we'll complete in the aviation safety contract, as long as it's not something specific to that line of business. But it's going much slower, and there are some big items to work on: pay, training, staffing. Those are a big deal right now, especially in that bargaining unit. And you look at what's going on in the aviation world right now. Some of the unions out there are getting in the private sector are getting pretty big pay raises. They're getting pretty good contracts, and we recognize that our members are public servants. We're not looking for $200,000 bonuses and 30-40% pay increases. Of course, all that would be nice, but we recognize that we're public servants, but we're looking to be fairly compensated and to get some of this done. And the FAA's team on that side is not with the program yet. I would say that bargaining team, and it's gonna our legal team is and bargaining team is frustrated with that particular line of business right now. And I spoke with the administrator about that, and I'm hopeful that we can get this thing done by the summer, and I think it's critical that we do.
Yeah. Did I hear you say correctly? It's been going on for 2 years, and if that's the case, is that kind of the norm, or a little bit longer than usual?
Well, it is, and it's. Let's say in both cases that's true. In the federal sector, it's not unusual for negotiations to take a little bit longer, and we have evergreen clauses in our contracts that keep everything in full force and effect until we get another one. So we're not without a contract. And we also have in the federal sector impasse procedures that we can follow that bring in third parties to decide things if we can't come to an agreement on stuff. So and that's crucial in the federal sector because, as you know, we don't strike. So we need to have somebody to be able to step in and make a decision from an arbitrator's perspective and we make our cases. So it is not unusual for federal sector negotiations to go longer. That said, 2 years is a long time, especially when you're at the table consistently. And we have been. Part of what feeds into that is we have gone after our entire contract. Often you open up a handful of articles and say, we're good with the rest. We're going to roll it over. We decided in this case, and that lands on my desk, that I wanted these contracts to be completely refurbished. I wanted to make sure we were up to date and that we had some legacy contracts going forward. So we did open, 80, 90 articles and added some new ones. So there's a lot of work that's been done, and it does take longer. But at the same time, a lot of work has been done on the aviation safety contract that'll feed into the air traffic contract or traffic organization contract for our technical operations folks and folks in mission support. So we're ready to roll with this thing, and they're not moving at the same pace we are.
We're speaking with David Spiro. David serves as national president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists. Check them out online at passnational.org. David, I want to switch gears here a little bit. I understand there's been a lot of attention focused on air traffic controllers and what we call runway incursions. Can you explain what's going on here and how is your union affected on this?
Sure. So, as you all know, there's been a lot of talk about airplanes getting a little too close to each other, right?
Yeah.
And on the runway, in the air, and clearly air traffic controllers and pilots are the direct boots on the ground when it comes to when that stuff's happening in real time. But our folks, our technical operations members, they certify, repair all of that air traffic control equipment. So those flashing lights you see when you're landing, that's the airport lighting system, the instrument landing systems, the radars, the communications, all of that sort of stuff, we maintain it. We also maintain the systems that tell the pilots when there's somebody on a runway. You'll get a big X on a runway in several airports around the country, based on the technology that we service and provide. Also, that provides air traffic controllers with advisory information if somebody's out there. So we maintain that equipment. We're responsible for it. We also drive out there on the airport operating areas where the airplanes are. Our folks have to go out there and maintain equipment. So we're out there with the airplanes, and you got to have your wherewithal and I think your orientation and bearings to be able to know where you are. It's not the easiest thing in the world if you're not used to it to understand where all those lights are and what runway you're on and what taxiway you're on, especially if you're at an extremely busy large airport like Atlanta or DFW. Those are complex areas, so training is important. And if something were to go awry, our aviation safety inspectors actually investigate those incidents and hopefully not an accident when those airplanes come too close together, or if a vehicle on the ground comes too close to an airplane. So we're involved in all of that. When it comes to staffing, which is what you're hearing a lot about with the controllers, they're legitimate. They have legitimate issues. Well, what disappoints me is that we are not hearing about the legitimate issues that are affecting our technical operations folks in the media, and it's not as exciting to talk about the specific technical work that people do, and it's a little complex to understand. people don't really understand all of the equipment, the 50,000 plus facilities across the country that these folks work on and take care of. And our staffing is down by 1,000 technicians across the country over the last 8 years, and it's not getting any better. And that's taking its toll on the skill and the ability of folks to maintain the national airspace system, which is also introducing risk into the national airspace system. So I think it's important that conversation be more robust when it comes to technical operations specialists.
So we're understaffed. Those working on the job because they're understaffed are stressed, and obviously that leads to mental problems. And I know you recently took part in a summit on what was called Navigating Mental Health in Aviation. This was put on by the National Transportation Safety Board. Can you reference that for our listeners? I'm sure that was an interesting discussion, David.
Sure, it was. So kudos to Jennifer Hamdi, the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, for inviting us to participate. One of our members, an aviation safety inspector, testified in front of that group, gave his story about how there's a concern from from the agency with regard to his medical clearances because he's taking a particular type of medication, and the problem is that people can't speak up. They're unable. If you're a pilot or someone that holds a medical clearance, and air traffic controllers sat on that summit as well. If you're one of these folks who holds a medical clearance, speaking up effectively can end your career. That you're seeking mental health assistance. If you're in therapy, if you've got any kind of medication you're taking, that sort of stuff is not. Right now, the agency looks at that and frowns upon it, and you have to turn in hundreds of pages of documentation to support your medical clearance, and it takes months and months and sometimes years to get that sort of thing done. At this point right now, it's the responsibility of a pilot or anyone with a medical clearance to stand up and say, hey, I'm not ready to do this right now, and they do it. These are aviation professionals who do speak up and say, listen, I can't fly an airplane, or I can't do the job I'm supposed to do with my medical clearance. So that's already in place. But they've got to look at this thing and decide what works for aviation safety. And if a doctor says that the medication a person is taking, a particular medication, is helping them, makes them they're not a threat to themselves or to others, and they can fly an airplane, and they're not drowsy, and all the other things that go with it, then the FAA can and should accept that. And to their credit, they've stood up an aviation rulemaking committee that we are going to participate in to look at this and decide. And it's a group of many folks in the aviation industry, and we're going to look at whether or not what the rule is, what makes sense, and we got to get this thing up into this century, because a lot of what we're talking about is based on medical assessments back in the 50s and 60s, and that just doesn't work, because you can't have people afraid to speak up, because that in and of itself introduces risk into the national airspace system.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they try to do when it comes to mental health awareness, is asking people to speak up. And if you see something, say something. But it goes contrary, obviously, when it comes to pilots. David Spiro joining us on our live line today, serving as National President of Professional Aviation Safety Specialists. Always enjoy talking to you, David. Passnational.org. You take care, and let's regroup in a couple of months. Okay, brother?
Sounds good to me. Thanks, Flash.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, the Communication Workers of America and the bricklayers and allied craft workers. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.